Our second speaker today is Stephen Mangold, and he's been a Toastmaster all the way back to late 2021. Since he is such a long-standing and entrenched member of Toastmasters, he's now ready to give his second speech.
Yes.
In this speech titled The Leader, the Funny One, the Smart One, and the Goofy One, Stephen compares two different groups who changed pop culture and asks why they still fascinate people today. Please help me welcome Stephen to the lectern.
Good morning, Toastmasters.
Morning.
In 1957, a boy named Paul and a boy named John got together and decided to form a band. Raise your hand if you know who I'm talking about. The Beatles. And you don't know who I'm talking about, you've certainly heard their music. The group, the Beatles, was comprised of Paul, the leader. He always tried to keep the band together, push them forward. John, the funny one, sarcastic. His wit kept the group down to earth, but he was a little angry and sometimes his own worst enemy. George, the smart one, perhaps the most underrated Beatle until recently. Critics have kind of caught up with him. And Ringo, the goofy one that nobody took seriously, but was the heart of the band. Together, the Beatles changed pop culture forever. They defined what it meant to be a band in the early days of rock and roll. They showed other bands that came after them what they could achieve and how they could push themselves further from album to album. And they still fascinate people to this day. There's been countless documentaries. One just came out on Disney Plus that's like 8 hours long. So beyond their music, as people, they captured everyone's attention. And those four dynamics, the leader, the funny one, the smart one, the goofy one, really spoke to people. But was there another group in pop culture that did something similar? Well, in 1984, a guy named Kevin, a guy named Peter got together and decided to form a fictitious group called the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was Leonardo, the leader, always tried to keep the turtles moving forward and focused. Raphael, the funny one, sarcastic, kept the group grounded, but sometimes his own worst enemy. Donatello, the smart one, most underrated Ninja Turtle, unless you played the video games, then you know he's kind of the best. Michelangelo, the goofy one that no one takes seriously, but the heart of the group. The Ninja Turtles started as an independent comic book about 4 turtles that had toxic waste dumped on them, and then grew to be teenagers who learned ninja from a talking rat and fought other ninjas and aliens. And it surpassed anything an independent comic book had achieved before that, sales-wise, popularity-wise, in that small world. Then when it became a cartoon and a children's toy line, it became a juggernaut, and it changed children's entertainment and pop culture forever. It was like the Beatles, they were a perfect storm of marketing and creativity. Like the Beatles, they were found underground in the sewers by their master Splinter, who taught them ninja skills. The Beatles were found underground in a club called The Cavern by Brian Epstein, who would become their manager, and helped them market originally in London and help create what we think of as Beatles persona. They worked together as a team. Both groups had common goals, common objectives. They worked together. Both groups were forever changed by chemical substances. And they're relatable. That idea of overcoming obstacles, working as a team, teamwork, that's something that we can all relate to. We've all been hungry and struggled. We want to see our heroes tackle obstacles. We think, what would we do in their position? In addition, both groups have kind of wish fulfillment because they're doing it with their best friends. 4 friends united together in a single purpose. For the Turtles, it's to defeat Shredder. For the Beatles, it was to become the greatest band in the world. But There are lots of kids' cartoons about heroes fighting villains. There are lots of bands who did maybe not as big as the Beatles, but overcame more than the Beatles, had more struggles than the Beatles. What is it about those two that really captured our attention to this day? And I believe it is because there's the leader, the funny one, the smart one, the goofy one. They're very clear characters. They're very clear stories that we can latch on to. That's especially important for the Ninja Turtles that were originally marketed towards children, something that children could understand, and the Beatles were originally marketed towards teenagers. In both groups, there's something for every kid to latch on to. There's something for every kid to say, I relate to that, or I want to be that. For me, with the Ninja Turtles, it was Michelangelo. He was the fun, carefree one, never had a care in the world, always seemed surfing, eating pizza. Took me a while to admit that I was really Raphael. And with the Beatles, I would rewatch A Hard Day's Night, their first movie, over and over again. I wanted to be John. He was smart and funny and witty and sharp and quick. But then, get a little bit older, you learn more about them. He wasn't a very good role model. And the Beatles, as presented in that movie, it didn't tell the whole story, for good and for bad. There was a lot that was left out. But the details don't really matter, because that core story that was told in marketing is a story, and good marketing connects with us deep down. That story that was told pushes all the details out of the way, so that we can relate to 4 kids from Liverpool who later became multimillionaires and most popular, well-known people in the world for a time. We can relate to 4 giant talking turtles who learned ninja skills from a giant rat. We can find things in common with them because they speak to what's common inside all of us. And it's that universal message that really speaks to us out of those 2 groups. And I believe is the reason why they still are persistent to this day. As much as we know about the Beatles now, it's still those 4 character types that we think of. And as many different kinds of Ninja Turtle TV shows and movies as there have been, they've never variated from those 4 character types. Now, join me for my next speech. I'll compare the Rolling Stones and the Power Rangers.